Oh, just see if you can hear me. I've got headphones sticking into my own as well for when it starts, because I'm aware there's a little bit of a lag. I just want to make sure everything sounds okay, looks okay, because obviously it's the first time I've properly done something like this. Okay, feedback starting. This computer wants to buffer. Okay, so it seems like the audio is going to sound a little bit weird. This isn't my usual setup. I mean, yeah, if you see my videos, you'll know that I'm hardly the. I don't exactly have much of a high-tech setup at all. It's literally just a camera pointing at a wall, pointing at me. But my usual thing won't do a live stream, so I'm having to use a different out. I don't have a microphone and things. So yeah, from what I just heard in headphones there from the playback, yeah, sounds a little bit echoey. Seems like we can't really do anything about that, but oh well, we will just go from there, work with it. I'm just going to do a little bit of preamble to start with, just in case other people are going to join just for a few minutes. Yes, as I say, one of you already speaking in the chat. It is great to have you guys here. Links to buying the book in the description below. This is weird. As I say, obviously, I was building up to releasing this book for a little while now, and obviously there's all sort of anxiety around that. Honestly, this live stream, this is what I have been way more nervous about in the past couple of days, because I guess it's kind of like the stress and anxiety you have in the build up to doing like a show in theatre or something, except I'm literally the only person here. And at least with the videos and stuff, I can edit before and after, or not before obviously, but I can edit them afterwards, so they're a little bit better. Yeah, this on the fly. See how it goes. Again, just a preamble. Earlier, kind of when lockdown started, I was also doing Zoom calls, which I guess are kind of like these live streams. Of course, that was for tutoring for GCSE and A levels. Oh, shut up! I don't want to hear you anymore. It's annoying hearing myself play back very faintly from that headphone that's dangling there. So I've done a little bit like this, but again, not to the same public degree. And otherwise, if you're following different on social medias, if you potentially see my Instagram or anything like that, then having photos of myself for the first time in a very long time, thanks to my friend Sam, who's been doing socially distanced photo shoots with me, again, masks and all that worn, except for in the photo itself. Obviously, stay safe, situation is as it is. But no, that's been very fun. I'm happy to do a couple more of those. Again, to try to get some kind of social media presence going. How about you guys? What have you guys? I realize not everyone can necessarily comment in the live chat because you need a channel of some sorts, but anyone who does, how have people been doing this past all of this? And again, now is the fact of there being a 20-second delay or something before it comes in, so. Or not, that seems closer. Anyway, hopefully you guys have been all right. Again, wherever your current situations are, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. I'll probably give it till 5 past, again, until I properly start this and doing. Can people hear me okay? I should probably say that. Anyone? Yeah, you finished your dissertation. Woo. So is that actually properly sent off now? Or is it, what situation? All right, yeah. Well, that's great. Got that all done. Take it you're free at this point. Well, I'm sure you've got other stuff going on, but you're free from that. It's all sent off and everything. Excellent. Great to hear. All right. Okay, well, if people join, then they can join. I was hardly expecting anything. Any kind of a big audience anyway, considering the kind of views we get on the videos and whatever. But whatever, we'll make a start now. Okay, so to begin with, just as I say that, we've had another person join. Hello. Yeah, to start off with, because I know people are going to have different awarenesses of what I've done before in terms of my writing. Some people will know that I have released a version of this book before, back in 2016. At the time, sixth form, just sent it off to a small publishing house because I didn't really understand exactly how the literary world works. I didn't see the point in having an agent, but that did limit me in who I could send things off to. So I sent it to a small publishing house. I won't name them, but it got into print and whatever. There were then issues. For one thing, when it came to me getting like the royalties and payments and whatever, I had physically seen more copies of the book than they told me had been sold. I'm pretty sure. And then also, again, maybe that was just a slight thing because they were technically an American-based house and I was in the UK. Maybe they, for whatever reason, weren't counting UK sales. No idea. But the point is that was happening. And then just over a year later, the publishing house collapsed. I think it technically still exists, but they basically let go of all of their authors. Basically said, we hope you have success somewhere else. So since then, I have been re-editing the book, this book right here. It's going to be the same story if you were among those who did buy it the first time round, but it has been polished, it's tighter, and also there are some new sections in it as well, just as because I've subsequently written, shouldn't shake the camera there, since I've subsequently written the other books in the series and I've got a better understanding of the world that exists within, I've been able to go back and add in other bits that kind of tie everything together with everything that's happening around in the surroundings. So if you did buy it last time, that is great. Thank you for that. Again, it technically is a different version. If you want to buy this version, I'll ask that you do, but obviously you don't have to, even if you haven't bought it before. We'll get on to more of the purchasing of the book in a little bit. But yeah, if you haven't bought it before, then that does make a difference. It is this one. When you do go onto Amazon, because the link I've put in the descriptions and on social media will lead you to this copy. If you just search Gift of the Mancynn in general, it will also show up used copies that are being resold of the old version. So if you buy those, none of the money will go to me, but also it's the old version. And it's also more expensive. I think the cheapest one I saw was £20. This is much less than £20. So to save your money, buy this version, whether it's paperback or the ebook. Cool. Live on Wednesday. Yes. No, I was trying to think because I know someone else when they got a copy, I think they got the dates mixed up because they said Wednesday 4th. So I assume that means that they were Wednesday and they meant the second, not Friday. But whatever. If yours is coming out Wednesday, then hopefully others should arrive Wednesday as well. I believe Amazon does say around a 3-day turnaround time. Obviously, yours isn't going to look exactly like this because mine's got a not for resale band all around it because this was kind of the test print. Just so I was happy that everything went along. I do have it is just slightly annoying me that I haven't been able to get an actual copy before now because even though this is all fine, I have this anxiety that, because this was the test copy, not the real copies will actually have some kind of mistake in them. Like there'll be a formatting issue or whatever. And I mean, in the very unlikely event that happens, first of all, one of the good things about KDP, the Kindle Direct Publishing, is that I am able to just re-upload an altered version of the manuscript, which would take into account whatever issue they've had. And anyone who bought it subsequently would just get that version. And if you bought one of the faulty versions, if you can help me become successful and famous and these books become popular, you can then sell that at a higher price for being the weird copy, like how the very first editions of Philosopher's Stone can get really expensive because there was something in it that was subsequently changed, and so it's unlike any other copy. Whatever. Yeah, so I think that's that. I think we had another person join us. Welcome. And kind of on that note then, it's been around 10 minutes, I will do the first of what I kind of suggested in the descriptions, and again, where I've talked about this stream on social media. But part of this will just be going through extracts of the book. See, I've kind of got my little tabs there for which bits I'm going to do. Again, for those of you who joined after I said so, apologies for the audio if it sounds a little echoey to you. I'm using a different thing to what I usually use because my usual thing won't do a live stream. If this sounds a bit off, apologies. But yes, so I'm just going to do the first of the extra readings from the book to just give you a little taste. This from the very first chapter. I'll try to make this as engaging as possible. And also, I cannot do voices. Disclaimer right there. So people are either going to sound the same to each other or whatever. Those exams have killed me, I tell you. Yeah, sure. Because you know what it feels like to be dead. There are only 10 of them. Now get over it. Mr. Sneaks wants to test us. We're certainly living up to his name. Another school project on the day our exams end. I mean, I thought they'd at least want to keep us alive. A research project on Egyptian culture is not going to kill you. It's easy. We know loads about Egypt. I don't. Your problem is you don't watch enough TV. No, your problem is that you watch too much. Do you get how annoying it can be when you're like this? Not everyone can do what you can. At least wait until the marks come out. Philip just couldn't understand Tony. It was just another fun school project. You'd think the exams were hard. His internal grumblings were cut short, however, as he realised that they'd reached the bus stop and that Tony was about to step onto a vehicle which would take him away until tomorrow. Wait, Philip called. Do you want to come over to my house for dinner? You live 15 miles away. So, my parents are going away for the summer. If you came over, we could arrange for us to meet up. It'll be harder once they're gone. It's not like you're coming on a science trip to Switzerland. Tony sighed. I'm busy. The bus door slammed shut and his friend was driven away. Once the bus was just a dot in the distance, Philip began his own way home along the side of the dual carriageway, leaving Wingmere Hall's school behind him. Cars of all shapes and sizes zoomed past him in a blur of colour. The din was so great that it prevented any other sound from being heard. Philip could only just hear himself think of his homework. Mr. Sneak had said something about either doing Egyptian lifestyle or Egyptian mythology. He wondered if he could do both. He might get more marks. Then again, Mr. Sneak might punish him for being a show-off or not doing the task properly. Oh well, the fun was worth the risk. He'd reached the bridge leading cars out of the town into the fringes of the English countryside, the broad river running beneath it. It was an old stone bridge with iron railings along each side. One side was plastered with graffiti. The glaring words contrasted to such a degree that they seemed to glow. Your eyes might just water at the sight. He leaned over the side, watching the small blue-green ripples past. The sounds of the roaring cars seemed to melt into the background. All he could see was the river. Every so often there was some sign of a fish. Philip began to wonder if the Nile would have looked as pretty back in ancient Egypt, with the pyramids on the horizon and clear skies above. If he'd lived back then, he would have knelt down on the sand by the Nile and watched the boats go by. The image in his mind's eye was so peaceful. He could use that as his project. A Day by the Nile by Philip Quint. It had a good ring to it. He decided he'd write it down when he got home. Philip's peripheral vision came back into focus. He stood up and got his new bearings in the woods. Philip took one step forward and tripped over a gnarled tree root, falling face first into a pile of fallen leaves. The thick canopy let a little light through, so the details of his surroundings weren't wholly distinguishable. This was the complete opposite of the open sky above the bridge where he'd been a second before. His legs felt like jelly as he clung to the crumbling bark of a nearby tree. Looking down, he saw something black on his hand. Philip peeled it off, only to recoil, dropping the slug. Rubbing his forehead, he set to work on locating his home. After a minute, he worked out that he was only a mile away and began to follow the path west in the leaf-littered undergrowth towards the village of Ackmore. He had to congratulate himself. He'd landed further away in the past. Once through his front door, he stepped into the peach-painted porch, slipped his trainers off, put them on the shoe rack, and headed straight for the flight of stairs. Hi, honey. How was your day? Damn it. He turned to face his mother, who was standing in the living room. Her loving, round eyes matched her misty top, and they were focused on him. Fine, Mum. I'm just going to my room. Okay, dinner's at 5. Once he'd escaped and ran up the stairs, he ran up the stairs and onto the landing. He slowed down here, knowing he was alone. She was kind-hearted and benign, but maybe too much so. He just liked to be ignored when at home. Now, What was that idea he'd had about the project? At the end of the corridor, he reached his door. He didn't bother to open it. He was too focused on his project. It had been something about the Nile, hadn't it? Not really thinking, he walked straight through the solid wood, not leaving a mark. One wall of his bedroom was taken up by a bookcase, another by a desk. His bed took up the third. Philip swung his bag down on the latter and began taking out his many school books. It was then that he realised he hadn't opened his door. Oh well. He'd been doing it unconsciously for many years now. It hadn't killed anybody yet. Philip skimmed through his bookcase for his atlas. He found it was in the centre shelf and extracted it from his fellows. Flicking through it, he found Egypt on page 241. At first, he didn't realise what he was hearing. It was a rustling coming from the chair by his desk. After 2 minutes of Philip not noticing, the figure gave up. Hello? Skeleton sitting with his feet up on your desk, eating one of your chocolate bars? Go straight through me, of course, but you have to appreciate I came all this way. Are you even paying attention to me? Philip looked up to see what numerous sources of fiction would have had him believe was the Grim Reaper sitting up in his chair. Who else would a talking skeleton in a black robe be? Yes, he asked after a moment of stunned silence. The apparition looked taken aback. That's it? Does this happen to you often? How many other skeletons are you acquainted with? Every other day does a creature from some godforsaken dimension materialize in your home. Earth changed. People used to be more fun, but you're so boring. You could have at least screamed. Look, do you want something? More to himself than to Philip, the skeleton muttered, I will never understand the human psyche. Oh, of course. I should have known why you're not reacting. Conditioning. Yeah, it's simple. It's evident that all my exams have sent me mad. I knew I should have been feeling more stress. The figure leaned back in the chair leaned the chair back onto its rear legs. The boy's acceptance, though we now realise was planned, was still unnerving. It's not the reason I'm thinking of, but I'm sure if you were to see a psychiatrist, they'd be able to find something wrong with you. Philip put his book down and stared into the skeleton's yellow eyes. They didn't look like the eyes of a hallucination. Yet, what would he know? Let's just for a moment say that you're real. Why did you bother coming to my house? Am I about to die? No, and I'd rather you didn't. Now Philip was starting to become intrigued. He may be mad, but that didn't matter. If this was the Grim Reaper, why was he here if not to take him away? It was as if the figure had read his mind. I came here to give you 2 messages. First, concentrate on the task you've been given. Philip let out a breath they'd been holding in. It was going to be some cryptic clue that he'd have to work out. It was almost cliché. Maybe Tony was right about him watching too much TV. He was almost disappointed with his brain for conjuring this up. Second, say no at the time. Why should I? Once he'd said this, the figure somehow looked a lot more menacing. He hadn't changed physically, but the atmosphere in the room seemed to have thickened. Just do it at the right time. We've planned it out, and it's easier to keep things that way if you don't throw things off course due to too much foreknowledge. We don't want you to get hurt. I'll be in contact under the name of Grail. You know, regardless of whatever it is you just tried to get across, if you wanted to be sure that I did something I did what you ask, you could be a little clearer in your instructions. Does the Grim Reaper just like to play games? To this, he got no response. This was too much for Philip's head. He had his Egypt project to do for Mr. Sneak. But before he could further analyse this mental cacophony, he had the sudden urge not to look at the figure in the chair. He couldn't understand it, but his eyes wouldn't focus on the stranger. It seemed to blur, go out of focus, and then it was gone. For a long time, Philip stared at the spot where it had been and the wall beyond. It wasn't as if the paint on the wall was interesting, but it was almost as if some invisible force was keeping them there. Where are you, dear? Either his brain was trying to kill him, or this was not his day. What, Mum? He just about heard her reply. It's gone 5. He looked down at his watch and realised he'd been staring at his wall for longer than for longer than he had been under that mysterious thrall. She was right. Philip glanced back at his desk. There was no sign of Gryle, apart from a chocolate wrapper and a slightly singed look on the chair. Okay, I see during that we've had a couple more people join us. Welcome. That was just a first extract from the book, Gift of the Mancynn, available now. Links in the description below. I'll just be doing a few of those over the course of this live stream, however long it ends up being. Hey, Dan. Good to see you. Yeah, so that's, bar the prologue, that's kind of the opening to the story where we set it off from. When I did the first version of the book, other than my parents, the first person who saw it was my English teacher, who's actually the person who did a quote on the back that I'll actually read in a second. He's also an author in and of himself. I didn't just randomly ask a teacher. But at the time, the first version, again, I think this was probably too much praise. He was kind of exaggerating, kind of encouraging me on, but he was saying it was like the kind of tonality of, say, Douglas Adams or something like that. For the most part, as I've kind of revised this version of the book and tightened it up, the tone has changed. There is still kind of elements of quirkiness in there, but no, not so much. That chapter is probably one of the bits that retains a little bit of the silliness, just in terms of reactions. Again, there is in-universe reasons why Philip is reacting the way he is. He's not completely freaked out by suddenly seeing this apparition. And as you read the book, you'll find out why he's not reacting. But again, just reading that there, I've just remembered that as well. Now, with the book, I mentioned before, obviously it's available in paperback and in ebook. Obviously, well, I say obviously, I am personally a paperback purist. Like, I would like the physical copies of the book. In that case, if you're in the UK, which most of you I assume are going to be, although I appreciate maybe not everyone, it's £8.98, of which after Amazon takes all of its cuts, I get £2.29, I think, per copy. So it's less of a percentage of royalties than I potentially would have got from other places. But that in turn, KDP was free, right? It is free to upload and everything too, whereas many other self-publishing services, while they'll let you have more of the royalties, you have to pay them charges up front, some of which going into the thousands, which includes all the marketing and stuff as well, and the cover art. I have to get the cover art separately. I'll talk. I've got that later on my agenda to talk about. But yeah, it could get a lot more expensive. So it's free on my part, but I have to do all the marketing, which is kind of why I've been trying to boost up all social media and stuff, which I'm still not brilliant at. So again, any sharing of the word of the book and stuff, greatly appreciated. But yeah, it's £2.29 per book I get. So the more copies, the better. But it's like a quarter of the price, whatever. The ebooks obviously are cheaper. They're £4 something, I think. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I get £3.69, I think, off of those. So even though the ebook is cheaper, I get more money per sale, as it were. So it's kind of up to you. If you prefer paperbacks as I do, great, buy that. But again, if you want to, if you prefer ebooks in general, or if you would just prefer to spend less money, then obviously you can get that. And kind of the upshot is, don't feel too bad because I get more per sale that way. For some reason, that's how it's working. But yeah, cool. Again, just a minute. Obviously, I appreciate not everyone is able to comment in the chats because you need some kind of YouTube channel or account or something. But anyone who does, feel free to leave messages. I've kind of been responding to people who have been talking so far. Obviously, a lot of this is just going to be me talking to the camera, but I hope that if you do have anything like questions you want to ask, things you want to say, or responses, do that, and I'll start a little bit of discourse if I can. And me making sure that I have plenty of drink to keep myself going because, yeah, I mentioned at the beginning, like a couple of months ago, actually a few months ago now, I was doing Zoom tutoring sessions for like a couple of hours at a time. I got so thirsty during those. How long's the book been in the works? Great question. So there's a couple of different answers to this. Strictly speaking, this book itself, I believe I started in 2013, but I only wrote a little bit of it and then stopped for a while because of school. Then in like 2014, 2015 time, that was when I properly wrote it and edited it and so forth, such that the original version of it came out in 2016. And I mentioned at the beginning there was a whole debacle with the publishing house and no longer available through them anymore, because they were. So I always feel tough because I don't want to like be accused of defamation or whatever, but through faults that were on their end mostly, they had to let all other authors go and so forth, with the blessing to restart elsewhere. So I've let it lie since there for a little while. I wrote some other things, finished the other books in this mini-series or this sub-series. But then last summer, thereabouts probably, I re-edited it for the first time. I finally came back to it and tightened it up and everything, added new sections to it. Then this summer, with the intention that I would get an agent this time, because again, one of the reasons why things kind of went skew last time is, in my youthful age of 17, 18, I didn't really understand how the publishing world worked. I didn't see the point of getting an agent, so I didn't have one. But obviously, if you have, because I was like, oh, they'll just take some of my money, I'll get even less. But of course, even though, yes, an agent will take their own cut, they're the ones who help you with getting you to the bigger publishing houses, with getting all the network connections and getting all the promotion and stuff. So this time last year, it was more my intention that I would have to try to get an agent so that they could do all that for me. This did not succeed. I did send out like applications, whatever you want to call them, cover letters to, and like CVs or whatever to various agents that potentially do the kind of work that I'm writing. None of them got back to me, which isn't entirely surprising within publishing. If you talk to authors, a lot of it, just like in acting with auditions, a lot of it is just rejection. There's so many people trying to get into the business that you're very lucky if you get that. But then, obviously, everything happened this year. Everything's going to change in general, because I've been working as a tutor. While I did enjoy the job and it was rewarding, whatever, I knew that I didn't want to do it anymore past these summer exams. As it turned out, the version of them that happened this summer, I'd had enough. I wanted to move on to other things. Specifically, I wanted to do something which will afford me more. Keep knocking the camera, which would afford me more time to do this sort of thing, commit to my writing and so forth. But because I was now in this situation where I was no longer getting an active income, and it was because originally the plan was I would have some other part-time job on the side, so I'd still be bringing in something. Because of what's happened with the job market and all the situation and everything, that's a lot less likely to happen. So I can focus on the writing, but no other income. I figured I can't wait to get an agent to get into a publishing house, because even if that happened, it can still take over a year for the book to actually come out, because the publishing houses just have a backlog of things that they're processing through. It's there's other people who got their books first that still need to come out. So no, self-publishing is going to be a lot quicker, even if more difficult to get the word out. So yeah, that's around June, July time. I just decided that's what I was going to do. So Amy, you've just asked a question, but I have a feeling I just answered it. Yeah, I'll repeat it in a second because there's a delay in messages coming through and so forth. But yeah, I've just lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, and so once I decided that it was going to be self-published in the near future, that's when I finally went one more time, went through, re-edited it once more, called all that brushed up, and then formatting. So well, yeah, so to answer the question anyway, just to reiterate, changed mind on the agent thing because it would just take too long and I need money. Again, I realized starting off author, not going to be if you guys helped to make this be like a bestseller or whatever, that would be amazing. But that's probably not going to happen. No matter what sales I'm going to get, it's still going to take time to get word out, to get sales. So it's still going to be slow going to build this up. And either way, again, just because of how Amazon works, there's a 2-month delay in me receiving the royalties for whatever reason. So any money that you spend on buying the books right now, today, or whenever, I'm going to get the royalties from that 2 months from now. So either way, there's still going to be this buffer window where I'm not earning anything. But hopefully in that time, we can start building up and getting that Cool. I think that was the end of that train of thought. Cool, but thanks for the questions. Oh yeah. The other thing I was going to say, because I mentioned before, how long has this book been in the works? There's multiple answers to this. I'll talk a bit more about the series as a whole in kind of after the next extract reading, which I'll start in a minute, because again, I've got my schedule. But in general, the series as a whole, I've been working on arguably since I was 4. As I've mentioned in some of my YouTube videos, videos on channel, if you want to check those out if you haven't already. I've been coming up with stories all of my life. Obviously, some of them, especially the very early ones, weren't great. Not going to do anything with those. But there's some that I've kept since then. And what I do is I'd have just like these A5 pieces of paper that I was just jotting down loads of notes on around my room. And one day when I was 10, I just looking at all the notes on my desk, and I just realized these, with a little bit of tweaking, could all exist within the same continuity. So I made this adjustment. I keep knocking the table. I made the adjustments, and since then, technically, that's how long the Ragnarok Chronicles as a whole has been in the works. Obviously, a lot of things have changed since then. Again, the story's been revised, made into proper stories that actually don't sound like they've been written by a child. And while I knew at the beginning it was going to be to do with Ragnarok ultimately, because it was around that time I'd come across the concept and I just found it really interesting. And I was like, oh yeah, there's mythological parallels here and there. There weren't ultimately that many in the beginning. It was more just, these are all these sci-fi stories that I've come up with, and I'll just say it's under this label. But of course, as things went on, I actually started writing them. I realized, no, if I'm going to be doing stuff under the title of the Ragnarok Chronicles, which inherently evokes mythology, I need to be a lot more explicit, a lot more certain in the connections that I'm making. So I since went through. I've looked in. Obviously, there's no way I can have an encyclopedic knowledge of everything that's involved in this sort of thing, because there's so much mythology in the world. But I've tried to go through all or as many of the ancient world mythologies as I can look into. And while there is crossover here and there, it's kind of like, okay, let's say that this sub-series or this part of the universe is what inspired humans to have this part of mythology. Because the whole thing is, the reason why we have the mythologies that we do, obviously to an extent, it's then humans continuing the stories and telling stories. But the initial inspirations were people having glimpses into the wider multiverse. But of course, at that time, they had no way of interpreting what it was that they were seeing, aliens and all this. So they came up with allegorical stories to try to convey it instead. So it's like the Andromeda Galaxy is the Mesoamerican mythologies. I don't think that's right, but it's the Andromeda Galaxy. The stories take place in Andromeda were one specific thing. These stories that take place in this specific period on Earth actually became this thing, and so forth. So I did that as well. In the original version of Gift of the Mancynn, while I still had some of those connections in there, I remember while in general it was, I don't think I got a negative review of this. The most negative thing I got was from the one professional review that I did get, which basically said that the backstory was too complicated. Which, whatever, each to their own. Again, I'll talk about that again later on. But other than that, it was all good. It was just a matter of words not getting out there for people to and be interested in buy it. But another comment that I got from someone was that, oh, you've said Ragnarok, but the horsemen of the apocalypse, who are some of the main characters in this book, aren't Norse. You've made a mistake. Now, again, there were still Norse things in there, but they just weren't the main focus, and they maybe were a bit more subtle. And it was more, oh, we'll get to them later down the line. But of course, from that comment, I realized people don't know that it's coming, and yes, it may look like I've been inaccurate. So again, as part of these latest revisions, I've also gone back through, and even though it's like the majority of these mythological connections would have already existed in the world, they're already in my head as, oh, they're in place, they're there, I've just made them a little bit more obvious. So again, you'll still need to know your stuff. You may want to be familiar with what happens in the actual event of Ragnarok, or who are the different gods and what are their stories, to kind of pick up on it, because I'm not necessarily using the names, but it's like, oh, this is a parallel for that this person's story in mythology. So you can notice the connections there, potentially. And also I've made sure that the word Ragnarok itself also appears in the story somewhat, so that there's hopefully a bit more obvious with that. Okay. So that question, that question went on for a little bit. Thank you, Dan, for that. That brings us to next extract. So jumping ahead a little, we now find Philip has joined up with a new friend, Eve Wade, in Venezuela, where they have just exploring the forests. They have stumbled upon something based upon having seen some weird structure over the treetops in the distance. I'll just repeat, not good at voices, so people may sound familiar. Also, apologies if there's any audio issues, just with it sounding a bit echoey. There is also, that was the wrong section. I didn't mean to open that one. There is also a section jump where it jumps to a different scene and jumps back again. So I'll just try to make it clear when that happens as to, wait, where did these people come from? You've got your 3 asterisks and jumps and it jumps back. Philip and Eve stood there, gawping for a few more seconds. It was the shape of the temple that had them astounded, not to mention the unknown pictographs and the fact that they'd discovered a lost temple in the middle of nowhere. It was on a raised platform that extended horizontally in regular steps until it reached its maximum width. Then it mirrored itself, retracting in regular steps. At the points of maximum width and maximum height, long slices of stone stuck out, pointing to exactly north, south, east, and west. And upon each of these slices stood a great column, twice as tall as a house. Resting on the tops of these columns were interlaced beams, forming an octagonal ring. In the center of the raised platform was then a stone building. Perhaps with sides of 25 feet in length, it had been made in the shape of a cube. Protruding from the roof of this building was the solitary pillar that they had seen reaching into the sky. Carved into the structure were the aforementioned hieroglyphs and pictographs Philip had never seen before. It didn't look like any written language of any tribe discovered at any point in history. In some respects, they seemed inhuman, the works of some other sentient race. Over the innumerable centuries, it must have been there. Vines had crept up its walls, spiraling up the pillars and slithered across its base. Human curiosity not letting them leave, the two hauled themselves onto the raised platform. Here they could see an entrance into the cube-shaped building. It was a sweltering day, with the sun still high in the sky, so Philip and Eve couldn't wait to get into the cool shade of the inner temple. The panels that made up the outer layer of the cube had a door-sized hole in them, presumably the entrance. No light entered the hole. It just stopped at the threshold, blocked somehow by the inky blackness. Throwing caution to the wind, they entered. Thankfully, Eve still had her torch, so they were able to see the cobwebs misting over the extravagant and abstract drawings that were on every surface of the inner sanctum. By the light of her torch, Philip was able to make out alien scripture, an alphabet of jagged lines and triangles. Behind the writing, and dominating most of the 4 walls, were gigantic circular diagrams, divided up into squares by grid lines with blue, red, white, or black dots every so often. Many of these strange circles overlapped like Venn diagrams. Growing from the walls, floor, and ceiling were thick root-like plants which weaved their way across their corresponding surfaces, all leading out of the entrance and into the open air. It was these, Philip presumed, that climbed over the outer walls. They all seemed to be pulsating ominously. In the dark, they could almost have been mistaken for veins, leading to a heart at the center of the structure. He and Eve stepped over these plants and, with painstakingly slow steps so as to not set off any traps like in the movies, they moved further from the threshold into the unknown. Their only guide, save for Eve's weak torch, was a glow around the center of the room. At least this space wasn't as confined as the tunnel before. Tripping once or twice over more roots, the pair came across a rock embedded in the stone floor, carved into a triangular prism. On the longer sides were holes down to what must have been the lower levels of the complex. Metal rods bent in a similar pattern to that of a spider's web covered the holes, preventing anyone from falling into its bright depths. The glow, it so happened, was emanating from here. Peering down through the mesh, Philip and Eve gazed into the caverns beyond, not properly seeing anything, the light being so intense. Philip straightened up first. Do you think we should be heading back? He wondered aloud. Eve straightened at his side. I don't know. We shouldn't stay too long. Philip opened his mouth, but the unmistakable sound of stone grinding against stone blocked their ears of any other sound. Turning to the back wall, they saw what they had visualized in their heads. The largest of the circles had retracted into the wall and rolled aside to reveal a second chamber. Maybe just one more section, was Philip's not-so-truthful solution. He wasn't really sure how much more room there would be within what they saw from the outside. Leaving the dusty hall behind, and not looking at Philip falling face first into a knot of the vines, Eve lurched at the lip of a cliff a few centimeters after the chamber's threshold. She stumbled backwards, not wishing to plummet to her death, and collided with the spluttering Philip. Bit of advice. Philip coughed. Don't bite the roots. Got that, thanks. Still not paying attention, Eve inched back away from the edge. From what light the torch gave off, she observed that the opposite wall wasn't in fact too far away, although the gap was still big enough to risk falling down. While keeping a firm grip on the doorframe, she stared into the fissure. Now she looked more closely. She could see a thin staircase gradually spiraling down along the wall to their side, there being a small gap to the left between her and the jagged top of it. Come on, Philip. Philip just continued to retch. Stop moaning. You said one more section. Not waiting for a reply, she grabbed his arm and dragged him onto the lip. See the step? Good. Jump on 3. 1, 2, 3. Philip flung himself into the air, giving himself to the breach. Eve, who had returned to looking into the darkness below, was brought back to her senses by a dull oomph to her left. Cocking her head to the side, she saw in the corner of her eye the silhouette of Philip tightly spread-eagled on the flight of stairs, bag weighing down upon him. She hadn't seen the bottom of the drop, but with her torch, Eve had seen other stone protrusions on the way down. A little more gracefully than Philip, Eve bounced on the top step. As she landed, Eve got shakily to his feet, nursing what graze it had just sustained. By the time he was steady once again, Philip was tapping her foot on the stone step incessantly. He was mirroring her disapproving gaze. Picking some dislodged pieces of rock, he held them up in front of her face. Before you make me do that again, let's just see how far this goes. And so Philip let go of the rocks, scattering through the air and down the steps. Their tiny thuds came to a halt sooner than they might have expected. Surprised, the two made their way further down the steps. Before long, the light of the torch fell upon some further stone leading away from the stairs back into the wall they'd come through. This section broad enough for them to both stand on side by side, before the staircase continued again on the other end. See? Eve perked up at this point. That wasn't so hard. She skipped the final few steps and landed nimbly on the hard floor, turning to step forth into the next area rather than continuing downwards. The moment she did so, torch brackets were alight, illuminating the scene. It wasn't a floor. It turned out that they stood upon a bridge leading to a circular platform in the center of the room. Around the 8 uneven walls, 4 of which held openings like this one, were what looked like rows of seats, similar to what you'd find in a Victorian operating theatre. Far below was the glow they'd seen from above. They weren't thinking of the time anymore. They had forgotten they were supposed to be getting back. The lonely archway on the platform ahead was all that filled their minds. Shifting their weight slowly, the intrepid, or maybe pig-ignorant, duo crept towards the transfixing edifice. Though they did move tentatively across the bridge, it still cracked and groaned, small chunks falling away here and there. This area wasn't structurally sound, but it was safe enough to get to the other side. Safe enough for them to get back, however, might have been another matter entirely. Now that they were closer, even Philip could see that the archway wasn't anything special. There were pictographs around the edges, just like the ones on the outside of the temple, but apart from that, it was just a regular, ancient, crumbling archway. It was probably big enough to fit a jeep through, but nothing larger. It stood upon a pedestal, raising it above a shiny platform, and there was a ramp connecting the two levels of ground. A little distance to the side of the pedestal, a round table stood, as old as the archway, with a viscous gel layering its top. None, however, dripped over the edges. It was now that Philip noticed the ominous silence, the silence you get when something is trying desperately not to make a sound. This place was eerie, if not downright terrifying, the atmosphere bearing down on them from all sides. Once again, Eve stared down over the lip into the chasm. This is wrong, Philip indicated. Eve sighed, deciding to play along. What is? The architecture. It's not like any known, or that I've seen at least. Do you know what this could be? Eve smiled. Another attraction my father could use to make more money off tourists. Philip spoke fast, trying to keep up with the rapid cacophony of thought going on in his head. No, well, probably, though I hope not. No, this could be evidence of civilization predating the Incas and the Chankay, maybe even the Norte-Chico. Really. I only say that because it does seem to be a derivation or branch of their constructs, what's left of them anyway, though its state of preservation challenges that. Philip was lost in a little world of his own, a little world of ancient artifacts. I'm sure, she said without any emotion. Philip came out of his daze. You're not listening to me, are you? You seem to be the expert. You're ugly and have no friends. You're probably right. Hey, have you got a camera on you? She called over her shoulder. Philip tore his gaze away from the arch. Yeah, he confirmed. He rolled his eyes and swung his bag over his shoulder, which was a great relief to his spine, and unzipped the front pocket. After a minute of rummaging, he produced a new camera. Gingerly, he handed it over to the girl. Put the strap around your wrist so you don't drop it, he warned her frantically. It was a birthday present. Whatever. Carefully, so as to not get an earache from the boy's complaints, which would surely not be any better than his show-off demeanour, Eve pointed the lens into the void. The camera was good quality, she mused. The picture was very clear. Unfortunately, it just looked like it could have been any other broad tunnel stretching before them. Philip was done scrutinising the archway and came back over to join her. I'll have the camera back now, if you don't mind. Patiently, she slipped the strap off her wrist and passed the item back to its owner. What a view, were the words that escaped from Philip's mouth. Down below, somehow suspended, were massive rings, each getting larger as they lowered into the earth. It was unthinkable how any ancient civilization could have achieved anything of this magnitude. But now the magic of it had passed. Both assumed they should be getting back for time and to tell someone about all this. As they started on their way, they passed the round table, which for a second glistened. Philip paused mid-stride. Eve continued for a few steps, not realizing she was walking solo, and then stopped as well. Philip? Don't worry, it's nothing. He leaned over the table, one hand on either side, examining the puzzling gel. He could have sworn that the gel was deeper than that on which it lay. The bottom of the gel was shaped like the inside of a bowl. It looked as if it should have come out of the base of the table, but when Philip checked, it most certainly did not, rather being only a few millimeters thick. It must have been an illusion, he rationalized. The gel only had a 3D effect of going deeper than it did. The multicolored dots floated around in the goo. Just to prove that it was an illusion, Philip stuck his fingers in, and his hand, and his forearm. To Eve, it seemed like Philip was being sucked into the table, his arm going in the top, but not coming out the bottom. From Philip's point of view, the gel was bending around his hand, such that he never actually touched it. Further and further he reached until... Rumble. Philip froze. There it was again, louder this time. The platform itself shook, cracks running down its edges. The light at the base of the pit suddenly fled. Eve was no longer looking at Philip. She was watching in horror as the rings lit up as one, lightning crackling between them. The next second, the lightning burst forth from the archway as well. The pictographs began to glow as if they were red hot. Philip wrenched his hand from the gel, but that didn't stop the rumbling. I think I'm actually going to stop that one there, because we're coming exactly to the section where I said before I'd be switching to different characters, because that bit was longer than I thought it was, and I don't want to give away the entire chapter. You should read it. Hey, thanks for buying the Kindle edition, Dan. I don't want to give away everything that's going to happen there, leaving a little bit of suspense. Cool, where are we at now? Okay, so obviously I've been talking about the backstory of this book, and I spoke a little bit about the franchise before, but for those of you who I actually haven't told and you haven't read the material around it, what actually is this book about? Because if I'm asking you to invest in my attempt to start this series, which is that I'm going to be writing it anyway, regardless. It's just whether or not it's successful. If I'm asking you to help with this, you should know what it is you're getting into. So, I mentioned already, if you were there at that point, that some of the main characters in this book are based upon the Horsemen of the Apocalypse. So what we have here is that in the wider multiverse, there is currently not an active conflict, but a conflict that occurred in the past between some major races on higher dimensions. Right now, the tensions haven't gone away, but it's more of a Cold War state, where some of them are just waiting for the next move to be made. One of these groups are the Brethren Lords, the Horsemen of the Apocalypse, wherein you have Graal Rapper, Warren Mars, Mordrin Myrna, Petty Lance, and Stark Vingfermin. There were other members of their order in the past, but various things have happened to them. Now, as it stands, the Brethren Lords do want to be the ones to make the first move before anyone else can. However, they realize if they were just to make an open assault of some kind, it would be noticed and they would potentially be stopped. So they're trying to go about things a bit more sneakily. Given that they are immortal, not indestructible, but they won't naturally die, the time isn't an issue for them. So what, other than the impending attack of anyone else. So what they have been doing over the eons is they have actually been shaping Earth's history, specifically human development, so how we develop as a society, technologically speaking, by the means of these specific individuals known as Mancyns. These are people who, when they were developing as embryos, had incorporated into their DNA by the Brethren Lords what we, as right now, might refer to crudely as dark matter, what others may call prima materia, what they would correctly call Jiang. It's this material which is part of what the baseline of the universe is made of, is incorporated in a more concentrated manner into these people, which gives them greater influence over reality. So any Mancyn, depending on their proficiency with their abilities, can they can manipulate the world around them, so they can go into transit when they relocate themselves to anywhere else and that they know. They can go out of phase, where they can choose which objects to pass between and which not to. They can generate bursts of energy or heat, fire, whatever. They can reproportion the mass within their body. So, for instance, if they wanted to run really fast, they could move more matter into the muscles of their legs. However, to do so, they'd have to take matter away from other parts of their body. So it's kind of a give and take here and there. Several of these abilities, because the Brethren Lords cannot naturally survive in our plane of existence, the Alpha Realm. It's toxic to them. So they need these Mancyns to be their emissaries for them, to act for them. The Brethren Lords just interacting with them in little pocket moments of time. I go into more detail on this in different videos on the channel, or I've also talked about it on the website, DominicHodgson.com, if you want to check that out as well, about the science of how the Brethren Lords and others can actually come into our world, but under what conditions that can happen for short periods. But get the Mancyn to do this, and they have been getting us to develop technologically over time to the point where now, in the very near future, hello, whoever just joined, in the near future, they will be able to weaponize our planet, and they've gone again, weaponize our planet to use to attack the other sides in this conflict with, in a more secretive manner, because who's going to be looking at a backwater planet like Earth? No one's going to be paying attention to that. So you then have Philip, who's been in the extracts been reading so far, who is the latest in the line of Mancyns, and based upon the progress that the Brethren Lords have with their plan, he is going to be the one, in theory, who will be there when it all kicks off. So for the most part of his early life, Philip has just been going about his business, aware that he has these abilities, but also innately, kind of subconsciously knowing not to let anyone know about them and to be secretive about it. He's also programmed not to question them. But now, obviously, they've let him grow up a little bit. But now it's coming close to time for everything to start properly falling into place. The Brethren Lords now need to start interacting with him and actually getting him ready for this role that they have for him. Of course, he doesn't really know what to make of this, and things are made even more complicated when a mysterious man in black starts also pursuing him, saying that he actually knows the truth about Grail and his brothers, and he's trying to save him from making this big mistake. So with these different people now trying to get him to join with them instead, Philip ends up under different circumstances with some acquaintances, traveling around the world to different places, like Venezuela in the extract I just read, wherein they learn more about the alien influence that's been shaping our world for all of these millennia. And all the time, he is having to decide what side he's going to fall on. Does he side with the Brethren Lords, which is apparently his destiny, or does he reject them like this mysterious figure is telling him to instead? You do have other figures in the book as well. You also have Mirdi, who will star in the next extract that I'll do. She is another player in this conflict. And she, at the point of this book, is looking to manipulate the Brethren Lords towards her own ends. They have worked together in the past, but their last encounter didn't end too well, so they've kind of parted ways since then. But now she's come back, supposedly seeking to reconnect so they can work together, but in fact, behind the scenes, she's trying to mess with them because, again, they are these powerful immortal beings, so that instead she can end up, over the course of this series, getting what she needs to actually put her own plan for vengeance of what happened to her in the past in place instead of theirs. Okay. So hopefully that's at least some bit interesting to people. Almost an hour in, doing good. Okay. Again, just as I repeatedly do before I start each new section, just say, if you haven't seen it already, the link to buy the book is in the description of this stream. You'll also find it Facebook or Twitter website, whatever, DominicHodgson.com. That was interesting to make. Glad you find it interesting. I think it's interesting now. Yeah, the website. There's a few people I tried to reach out to potentially help me build this thing. None of all of whom were great sports about it, but none of them were able or were available, or they weren't able to help in the way I needed, other than giving advice and stuff. So I've kind of made this site on my own using Wix.com. Which it was at the advice of one of said friends, Sasha. It's kind of because I had at the beginning some vision of what I wanted all the pages to look like and so forth. And I'm aware that my ideas for pictures and so forth and images, design, aren't always the best. This cover, which I am actually really happy with, this was the fifth or sixth idea I came up with. The first ones, I'm aware of that. But I had this idea for the website, the homepage, with like the hexagon being one of the main things you see with the different buttons around it as you read the book. So it's not like a major, massive thing in the books, but hexagons do show up as a thing in the stories. Hexagon, they have different slides. And it's like, okay, let's build this. It's not going to be conventional. I can't really use a template, but let's see what happens. So what about I think it worked out okay. I think it looks a lot better on computer or tablet than it does on the phone. On the phone, everything's kind of narrow and squished in. but do what you will. It's got links in there. Obviously, a lot of it still needs to be made in terms of like the pages with the content on. There's a kind of a couple of different things. It's both just a general author website about me, just think this is who I am, this is where you can find my stuff, like a portfolio. But it also, there's a section of it, if you get deeper, acts kind of like a wiki for I called it the lore directory, which basically the similar things to what's happening on the YouTube channel, just in a written format and in shorter articles. As you would a wiki, a fan wiki for any other franchise you might think of. There's only like 5 or 6 pages on that lore directory so far, so I need to add a lot more, but I'll do that when I have the time. I'll flesh it out and build it out. I've said on there, but also in general, on the pages that relate to the book, for both the book's page itself and like the page for Philip and whatever, I've only put like vague non-spoily stuff for now. In each case for each book or any content that relates to the books, I'm going to wait a month before putting up like anything that actually, this is actually what happens in the book, and there'll also be like a tab thing where you click on it to specifically see the spoilers. I don't know how many people are going to care initially, but you know, keeps the yeah. What was annoying with that? I think the last thing was just the legal side of things, like the privacy policy and whatever, which because again, I am in no way tech savvy. I don't know how these things works. I didn't realize that the website would automatically come with cookies without me opting to put them on. So I then, again, from one of the people who I reached out to help with the website in the first place, this comes back to me after launch and said, "Hi, your site has cookies. You need to put a warning up about that. And then, do you accept the cookies?" I didn't know that was a thing. So that was like the morning after the launch of the website. That was a rush to get all that up. This is the privacy policy. Do you accept? I do not understand what the cookies do. I've looked at their descriptions. Like, I don't know what information to take. They're just basic website cookies, but it's like, not my thing. But all the legal stuff should be covered on that front, and the website itself fine anyway. Yeah, cool. Okay, so yeah, book about sure. It's a short section, but also again, I said initially that this will probably go on for a couple of hours. I'm thinking until 2. I don't actually know how long I'm going to be talking about this for. I'm just coming up to halfway through my schedule of things to go over, but some of them are going to take longer than others. Either way, I'm specifically doing this when I have the house to myself. It's obviously I can't say I don't want to be overheard because you guys are listening, but obviously there's a difference between talking to someone and someone overhearing a conversation. It's like why I don't like talking to other passengers in a taxi, because I'm not necessarily talking to the driver and I don't want to be overheard. Cool, yeah, thanks, Rob. I mean, I get that, but it's like what information and so forth. But yeah, yes, my mum is going to be getting back at some point. I don't know when. Later in the afternoon, hopefully. But I've left a note on the door saying that I'm doing this in case she does turn up sooner than I expect. But yeah, ideally going to go as long as I have things to talk about and there's things to interact with you guys. And then I'm alone, basically, here doing this. Anyway, I should stop rambling. Most of this is rambling, but I'll stop. And get on, say, to this next bit. Now, this next section is actually one that I, when it comes to giving sample extracts, this was the one that I would often do with the first time round. And it's among the sample extracts you can download from the website and whatever. Because A, it's just a section that I really enjoy writing, but also it's more of an isolated... Yeah, no, Amy, no. You have a high chance of a cat cameo because the cats are asleep over there, but no. Yeah, this section here is more of a bubble. It relates to, it's setting up stuff for later in the series rather than necessarily being pertinent to this story specifically. Obviously, it does tie into it. So it's easier to read this bit in isolation. Right. So for the context here, what we have is Mr. Sneak, who is Philip's headmaster. He's having a little bit of a panic attack in like a marketplace, and he's run into his solicitor, Gideon, and they've kind of, to help calm him down, Gideon has taken him sneak back to his own house. The front door slid back across the floor, closing silently. Gideon looked around at the assortment of antiques. He moved forwards down the hall, peeping his head through the open doors. He finally came to a room that looked as if it could have been the living room. Isn't here okay? Mr. Sneak was a little slower, spending time double-checking all the new locks on his front door. He turned slightly at the question. Yes, that's fine, he stammered, still in the grip of his panic. All of a sudden, the phone began to ring. Its awfully cheery jingle bore into their heads, the vibration making the little tea table shake on its spindly legs. Neither wanted to pick it up, both just staring at the phone, waiting for the other to make a move. As nobody did, it went to the answering machine. Mrs. Cage's voice blurted out of the tiny speaker. Have you had any Mr. Sneaker pulled the cord from the wall. The phone was dead. Gideon only pondered this action for a moment before putting it down to another side effect of whatever the man was suffering from. He shook his head and led Mr. Sneak into his own living room. Though it was summer, there was a fire burning in the hearth. Mr. Sneak obviously didn't get much company, or at least he wasn't very well prepared for it. There were 3 chairs, technically. There was only one that you could sit in. It was the one nearest to the fire, its back turned to it. The other 2 were covered in piles of something incomprehensible. It might have been reports or some other school-related thing, yet it might just have likely been some secret messages intercepted by from MI5. Gideon offered that seat to Mr. Sneak. Hubert hurried over. No, that seat is for you. He dusted it off, not that there was any dust, and moved it under Gideon. Hubert then moved to shove the pile of whatever off one of the other seats. Gideon thought to himself that these chairs must have only had sentimental value, as he didn't feel comfortable in his. It felt tighter than it first appeared. He tried changing his position in the chair, but that didn't work. Giving up on that, the solicitor took in a more detailed view of the room. Most of the walls were bare, save for the wallpaper, which was a sludgy brown. There weren't any windows in here. All of the light came from the fire and candle stubs placed here and there, wherever there was a flat surface that wouldn't go up in flames. There was one painting, the only thing on the walls. Difficult to interpret, it was probably some abstract art form Gideon rationalized. Seeing there was nothing left to unravel, by sight at least, Gideon turned his attention once again to the quaking man sitting before him. So, what is it you wish to tell me? Hubert wouldn't keep his eyes on one thing, and they were never on Gideon. For a while now, Hubert began, I've been having this feeling like someone's always watching me. His eyes drifted to the crackling fire behind Gideon. Gideon turned to see what the man was looking at. He, of course, saw nothing. Is anything the matter? He asked with a hint of concern. No. Well, of course, somebody's watching me. And before you say anything, it's not just me. The others are feeling it as well. Gideon looked directly into Mr. Sneak's eyes, and for once Hubert looked back. What others? If you have evidence, then I may be able to help you. Why haven't you brought me to them already? Brought them into this discussion? If they're feeling the same way, affected in the same manner, then Hubert leapt to his feet. Never! They can't know. They'll find out. Hubert then seemed to realise what he had done, looked around for an excuse, and proceeded to sit down again rather sheepishly. I have got myself in way over my head, Hubert said, quieter. I have become involved in something I should not have. I've been so very stupid, so stupid for so long. So this is illegal? Queried Gideon, trying to understand the full extent of the problem. And if, after all, he could present a case for Mr. Sneak that wasn't one of insanity. What is it you've got yourself involved with? Is it drug-related or fraud or... Hubert began to chuckle maniacally. You wouldn't be able to comprehend it. Not the magnitude, not the risk, and certainly not those behind it. Gideon leant forward in his chair, which, as it turns out, made it even more uncomfortable to sit in. Try me. Hubert's head whipped to the side, staring at the fire, his eyes bulging. After seeing something, Gideon couldn't tell what, Hubert began to make himself as small as possible, curling into a ball which seemed impossible to Gideon, who still found his chair to be overly constricting. Gideon looked at the fire once more and found the same result. Nothing. What is it? There was a long silence in which Hubert just rocked backwards and forwards, seemingly as often as he could. Through clenched teeth, he muttered something too quiet to be comprehensible. What? For God's sake, get out! Hubert whispered. It would have been better if he'd shouted, but his voice was calm, creepy. Said that wrong then. This was too much for the solicitor. Gideon took the invitation and made his measured way back towards the front door. He might call 999, but what was the most they could do? He might just drop this particular client. He had plenty of others to choose from. Hubert couldn't take his eyes off that seat. There wasn't a clock, but he knew it was almost time. He would come very soon. He just had to keep waiting. There was no point in trying to run it. Never worked. Not for anyone. Not when you were dealing with these people. They would always find you in the end, and they punished those who inconvenienced them. In the background, the fire crackled, its light shining off the shadowy walls of his living room. He hadn't moved a muscle. You would have thought that by now he'd have run out of sweat, yet his pores dripped still in his state of mortal terror. It wasn't a sudden change. It started as part of the woodwork of the chair, an arrangement of the visible knots and lines. In the following minute or so, the lines became more prominent, a clearer outline, until finally there was a blatant image of someone sitting in the seat, made up of the natural patterns in the wood. Following its transfiguration, the outline looked Hubert up and down, inspecting the timid man. Her fingers drummed on the arms of the seat. Eventually she spoke, which in some ways was a relief for Hubert. He had never been good at handling tension or suspense. Yet the lines that were her mouth did not move. It was in fact the crackling of the gentle fire behind the chair that seemed to form the words. These chairs were provided for the select only. They will not want others sitting in them. Yes, I noticed that with Gideon, Hubert managed to say. Her voice filled the room. He should have been used to it by now. It had been happening for long enough, but nobody could keep their calm in the presence of this associate. Slowly, the figure rose from her chair with a symphony of creaks, the body tearing itself from its template. Her face remained immobile and emotionless, swiveling upon her timber neck. The lifeless carvings of eyes took in his shabby abode. It only just occurs to me that we will need to obtain you better accommodation for your efforts. You've done well over the course of your work with us. The fire crackled in the grate. Hubert bowed his head. You are most kind. Your approval is unnecessary and, as always, unwanted. If I may be so bold, Hubert's voice trembled as he looked up at his superior. The boy has his task, as you wished, so is not my part complete? Can I not go back to my normal life? The fire flared. The sound of burning reverberated loudly like crackling laughter. The figure cocked her head and began to circle Hubert's own seat. You think that was your only duty to our cause? That my coming here now to congratulate you on your straightforward success was a sign of our parting? She stood behind the quivering man and ran her wooden fingers through his thinning hair. No, quite the opposite. We have plenty more planned for your piteous group. But think yourself lucky. I'm not known for my benevolence. Well, then again, I'm not really known, am I? The feel of her fingers lingered on his scalp for a short time after she had disappeared, merging with the patchy wallpaper where her pattern disappeared. It was a long time before Hubert Sneak got himself up again from his chair and moved around once more. He wouldn't contact Gideon, or anyone else for that matter. This was his other life, outside of the pristine workplace and ordered systems. This was his secret life, the private one, which no one else could share, the one that kept him within the grip of fear. Okay, so that then, if you haven't read it before, is your first introduction to Mirdi, that character that I mentioned before, this other alien figure who is trying to manipulate things behind the scenes, even more so than the Brethren Lords are in trying to get Philip to fulfill his duty. Sorry, just getting the schedule back up. Okay, all right. Now, it's at this point that I would like to try something, because Obviously, again, a lot of this inherently is going to be just talking to you guys through the camera, but I'd like to get a little bit of kind of back and forth going. So I want to try to do some Mad Libs. Now, because of how I'm doing this, so I'm just literally just using a webcam. I'm not using any other fancy equipment. I don't think I can screen share, so I can't show you any of what I'm doing. But if I put in general, the kind of prompts that I'm looking for into the chat, as well as I'll say them out loud. Again, I know not everyone can comment. If you don't have like a YouTube channel that you can comment through, because I'm assuming most, if not all of you, know me personally. If presumably you have me on Facebook or something, or Twitter, whatever, you could message me quickly via there if you want. But we'll start with a short one just to see if this works. If this doesn't work, then we'll just put a halt there. But if it does, we'll try another long one. But if you can see in the chat, these are the kind of things I'm looking for. So the way Mad Libs works is there's like a template of a funny short story or whatever, and you don't know what this thing is going to be. Instead, it just asks for this type of word, you put them in, and then it will plug them into the story and you see what's created. So if you want to contribute, we're either in the chat or message me some other way. So looking for words that end in ly, nouns or a thing, a name of a liquid, verb, so doing word, a number, an adjective, an illness, a job, and a body part. Some of these there are multiple of, so it keeps suggestions coming. You can suggest for multiple if you want. If not, if there's any that are particularly missing, I'll just make up some random ones of my own. I'm not going to tell you what the context is for this one because I think it might be funnier. If these really are just random words you might come up with. I now, of course, am waiting for the lag. Whatever for you to now hear me potentially. Hopefully, this few of you have been commenting so far might give some suggestions. Again, don't have to be in order, don't have to be all of them, just any random words you might want to throw forth. Meanwhile, someone just messaged me. I'm just going to see what that is. People just saying that they're going to spread word about my book, so that's nice. I'll read that later. Acid, acid for liquid. Okay, this could be fun. Liquid is acid. Okay. I'm maybe just to. I'm going to start just come up with saying random words. If you happen to, because of the delay, say anything that I think that I'll replace it, but just say, like for a word ending in ly, for instance, we could say rapidly, for instance, could be your first word. For a noun or a thing, like we, flatly. Okay, is there another adverb? No, there isn't. Okay, I'll put flatly as my adverb. Maybe this isn't going to work more than once. Oh well, we'll still do this one because it should be fun. Illness, again, just in the random order, I'd say chickenpox. Occupation, postman. I don't know. Now, what's yeah, but do I want to acknowledge that? I don't know. I don't know. No, I'd rather avoid that person to not acknowledge the current situation. That's fine. Noun, actually no, verb could be message because that's what you just did there. Thank you, Rob. Noun could be book. Let's go thematic. How about a number? Number anyone? not, so I'll just say 7, because that's apparently the number of people who are watching right now. All right, I'm just going to fill these in quickly at this point. Body parts, let's say eyes and foot. No. Tables. Okay, so I've got left verb, noun, and adjective. Any particular things? We should just anything around you. Verb, live stream. Let's use that as a verb. And face masks. Fine, I will acknowledge something of the situation. And adjective, something to describe things with. Interesting, why not? All right, so just give it like, again, I don't know what exactly the delay is. I think it's anything up to 20 seconds. So just see if anyone else has any other suggestions. Quick, put this in the chat or message me directly if you know me. If not, we'll just start this and we'll see what has happened. Of course, if you want to have a go at any of these yourself, then the link is just www.madtakes.com. If anyone wanted to have a go at any of these yourself in your other time right now, or find any things that you find interesting. All right. At this point, then, I'm probably just going to make a start. So this is an instruction on how to wash your face, because again, some slightly apt for right now. So in order to wash your face flatly, you must first wet your book in warm acid. Then live stream it across your face 7 times. This will wash off any remaining face masks. I suppose if you had dipped it in acid, that would get rid of the face mask. When you are done, you should message the cloth in interesting water, so acid. You should also wash your face with a camera to keep it smooth and shiny. This will also keep away any tables. Don't worry, it is normal to experience chicken pox the first time you try this. Consult your postman if you break out in eyes. This works well on your foot too. Yeah, okay. Guys, we're doing that without actually 10 people in the room. Having someone break out in eyes, that would be horrific. If you take a book, cover it in acid, rub it on your face, and rub a camera on your face. Might get chicken pox. Talk to your postman. Great advice. Do that if you want to stay clean. All right. Okay. I think it's safe to say, fair enough. At least. Okay, I'm not exactly expecting to do other live streams in the future. Probably will at some point, but I have nothing planned for the near future. But yeah, probably want to make work how to this kind of to and fro maybe works a little bit better in the future. It was something I just wanted to try. Get back to what's normal after this. Cool. Cover art. So I mentioned before this. I went through a number of different versions to try to get to this current cover art bit here. Previously, I had as in with the previous version of the book, it didn't specify how many eyes involved. It just says you break out in eyes. So I suppose wherever, because it says you're going to wash your face with it and your foot. So presumably, however many eyes you can fit on your face and your foot. They are hit and miss, but you do get odd random things like that. Anyway, yeah, the previous version of the book, you had also that's a good indicator of the delay. I got a friend to do the previous design, which is a good design. I liked it, but I wanted to do something different this time. Do I have the previous version here? All right. Yeah, this was the previous version. So it's darker. Maybe won't show up as well. But yeah, you've got your Philip standing in the middle with pyramid there, DNA and stuff. I like that old design, but I wanted to go for something different this time round. With this, I ended up going to a website called eBook Launch. I looked at a number of different services that would do it, so many of which are expensive. All of them are expensive. Like, unless you're, because there are a couple of people who will do artwork on Fiverr, apparently, which is going to be cheaper, but I didn't end up checking those out. But like, it can rack up like many hundreds. Actually, no, I'm sure some were over $1,000, if not a couple of grand, to do all the artwork and stuff. It's completely exorbitant. This was still expensive, but it's an investment to go into it. I won't say exactly how much, but there were limits on how much I was going to pay. But also, I like the artwork that they'd already done. They'd shown off in their portfolio. They acknowledged that they did series work, so I'll be getting them to do the rest of the series. But because it's reliable, I like their work. But also, if it's the same people doing it, it should be the same style and quality throughout all of the ones, at least in this first sub-series. Because again, with the Ragnarok Chronicles, with these all being interconnected, it's all one big franchise of the Ragnarok Chronicles, but the individual like sub-series you can read individually. And more if you read them together or multiple of them, that then builds out this wider picture. So this first series being set in 2016, because that's when the first one came out, and because of other things to do with dates and stuff that goes on in the books, it was slightly awkward to change the dates to 2020. So yeah, keep it set in 2016 technically. I do actually have another book that for a while has been meant to be set in January 2020, and there is a plague in the story, so I may want to change that in case that now comes across as insensitive. But yeah, that was a few years ago. So because this is 2016, that'll be 2020. The past. So anyway, yeah. So for the 2016 series, at least, I'll be going with these people. Ebook Launch. Even though it's ebook launch, they obviously do paperback in the back as well. But yeah, it was good. They were very polite, very helpful. The backwards and forwards of the emails about discussing designs and like the compared to other covers that I liked stylistically, and they looked at my sketches that I had drawn, which I now wish I actually had with me, even though they probably wouldn't show up well on the webcam because they are crude sketches for what this ended up being. But, you know, it was the only annoying part of it really was just the delay in emails backwards and forwards, which again, because they're busy people, I'm sure. But it was effective, so just waiting to hear back on with any responses to any questions or anything like that. So good. Definitely would recommend if you were trying to release something of your own. They are credited on the front page there in cover design. So check them out if you want. I have a feeling I was about to say something else, but I can't think right now. Oh yes, that was it. Because I completely forgot to before. I brought up the fact that I got a quote from an author that I know because he used to be an English teacher of mine. That I put it on there because it's the only quote that I got. Because I reached out to a few different people, most of who didn't get back to me. One politely declined, basically he wasn't able to read the book at the time. He was very busy and he couldn't. One person came back to me. It's an awkward because okay. Hodgson has created an alternative world more plausible than our own, rich in detail, a superbly crafted vision which draws the reader in. Now, the second half of that, obviously very praising and I'm grateful. More plausible than our own. Now, I asked Mr. Stephen Bywater just to clarify what he meant by that when he first sent over the quote for me. And it basically, it is an acknowledgement of, compared to everything that is going on right now, either politically or just in the general climate right now, a story in which the horsemen of the apocalypse are manipulating a teenager into being their emissary to take over the world is more plausible. I think that says something, either about the book or the world or both. Take what you will. It's still nice to have something to put on the back as well as the blurb. That's another thing. Books don't have blurbs anymore. But we have a short thing in the back cover, and it's something online. I need to put my computer on trash. I want this to die halfway through. Yeah, the fact is, it was New York Times bestseller, or something like the critic's opinion. Is it? What is the book about? So yes, I'm not good at succinct summaries. I have blah 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 blah. Keep going on there. pretty sure it is still shorter than the previous one, like the first version of this book's blurb, but still, yes. Okay. Whatever. Yeah, okay. At this point, because I've just looked at, again, my schedule for what I want to talk about, and I've kind of already covered the thing that comes after this. So, who was that? That was that one. I've kind of actually already talked about what's coming after this, so I'm going to have to change slightly. So let's shift to the next extract now and work out what's going to come afterwards. Okay, so, oh, hello. Right, here. So I just had to let the cat out. All right. So, when it came to writing this, because again, I've got the ideas of all the grander multiverse. This is all taking place within. I am one of those people who will be like, if you have a grander narrative or something planned ahead, there should be at least like some acknowledgement of it, rather than it being made up in the moment. Not that there's anything wrong inherently with like coming up with sequels and stuff after the fact, but I always think it works better if obviously a sequel was planned from the beginning, or this stuff comes from the beginning, because there's a risk if you're coming up with more stories within a given world after the fact, that you're now just kind of scrabbling for inspiration and so forth, rather than it being part of the initial plan. So as such, when it came to first writing this book, I did put in kind of in the middle this whole section with knocking the table, which is one of the characters basically explaining to the others the truth about the multiverse. It's kind of a few pages exposition of just this is the parameters in which reality works in this book. Now it is a bit of an exposition dump. Hopefully it kind of makes sense within the narrative why it's happening then. I hope it still is interesting enough. It's because it's talking more about the grander scheme of things and things that will kind of pay off later, rather than what's necessarily happening immediately to them there anyway. And I've kind of gone back and forth. Ultimately, I've kept it in there because if you've read the first book, or the first version of the book, then you've already read this stuff. And anyway, I think it's good to have this establishment of this is how the multiverse works. It sets up the world, even if it does go on for a few pages. Anyway, that's just what I'm going to do for you now. If you have watched some of my videos, especially on like explaining the multiverse and so forth, you may have heard some of this before, but either way, there's going to be some news. So happy that he could find out some more about, well, everything. Philip's next question nearly spilled out. So what is it with Grail and the others? What's their backstory? Why are they, Noah rubbed his neck. You know what? I might as well just tell you everything to save time. Okay, well, you must understand that although I was taught a lot on this subject during my time with the Lords, I don't know every fine detail. All right, let's go from the beginning to reduce the chance of me missing something. To start off with, I have to explain to you the basic structure of the universe. It's not, as scientists believe, infinite to indeed entirely linear. All the modern theories require the human perspective of reality to be correct. But the thing is, the multiverse isn't quite as we perceive it. Think of it like a living organism. Within it are millions upon countless millions of cells, or in this case, universes. I believe there are around 870 followed by 24 zeros, whatever number that would be. Universes in our multiverse. Within these cells are then two planes of existence, the alpha realm and the inner region. I assume you know that the majority of an atom is empty space. Well, within these spaces are in fact other atoms, just out of phase with us, which creates the inner region, what you would call a parallel universe, more so than you would the other universes in the alpha realm, but I'll get onto why that is momentarily. There is in fact a third plane, most evident between these two, still relatively unnoticeable though, which consists of pure spec energy. And that is further excited by the friction between the atoms of the alpha realm and the inner region, fighting to exist in the same space. But I digress. The universes in the Alpha Realm and Inner Region, respectively, are not unique and individual, as humans suppose. No, they're not in the way they think. If you were to take a universe, the one next to it would be identical, except for very slight changes. Only minute, but they're still there. And every one is absolutely motionless. This is where time comes in. You see, our consciousnesses, what they'd call it borea, but you might call it them souls, are in fact energy pulses which move between the universes at a rate which we cannot detect. Our perception of this movement is like a stop-motion movie. We move so fast between the still realities that we appear to be moving fluidly. Now, people before us have realized that this model of the multiverse allows for time travel. If one could move from universe to universe outside the main soul flow, one could travel to the Tudor era or some unknown period of the future. This does bring up a problem, though. To do such a thing would inevitably change the course of history, and theoretically this would spawn a new string of universes which would follow a logical course after the new historical event, yet keeping as close as possible to the original storyline. Think of it like a detour. You are redirected, but sooner or later you will get back onto the main road. From our point of view, nothing will have changed. In fact, any pulses beyond the altered universe, nothing would change. They would go through the circuit of universes before coming back around again to the new event, only at which they would join the rest of the pulses going in the new route. Once no more pulses are going through the old universes, it is thought that they would go cold and dormant into a state of hypoborea. But that's not all there is to the multiverse. Think back to the organism analogy. In a living thing, there are spaces outside of the cells, such as for the plasma and the arteries, or inside the esophagus. In astronomical terms, such space is called the outer region. Things in the outer region can move of their own accord, at a speed irrespective of that which we perceive in the Alpha Realm. This is where the Brethren Lords exist. This is their place of work and operation. It is also where a place of beings referred to simply as the entities live. They are creatures of pure energy. You may call them gods, they certainly do about themselves. However, they did not create the multiverse of such. If you're looking for a divinity that conclusively did that, that's hardly yet beyond the speculations of faith. They're more like caretakers, making sure everything within it works properly. But for most of the multiverse's existence, they have been the dominant race, the undisputed rulers who lived in a grand city made of energy just like them, the cortex. There was a time when there was no movement between the universes. They were all silent and still, but there was always movement in the outer region. After eons out in the void, the entities had been wanting to properly explore the Alpha Realm, for in their non-corporeal estate, they could not exist in our plane of reality. This is why they sought out a race of beings which lived on a planet which drifted alone in the outer region. These aliens were forced to build the entities solid ships in which they could exist. As great builders, they did just that, because of which they were enslaved so that their services could be used again. As it turns out, they made robotic workers to take their own place in time. Soon after, they managed to create a device which distorted the energy waves of an entity until the point at which they turned into matter, a phenomenon which has been shown in the collider above our heads, although not to the same extent, of course. The first 6 subjects of the experiments became Graal Repa, Juan Mars, Stark Vingfermin, Petty Lance, Kiranat Valdezata, and Upre Shun, the original Brethren Lords. They had built for them from a combination of their most advanced technologies and stray spatial bodies, towers, which were strategically situated around the outside of the universes, along with a net of Melosium satellites, which scanned the universes from within and transmitted the data back to the towers outside. As the energy to matter technology was new, they didn't want to burst straight into the Alpha Realm. They were taking it slowly. They found something called the Ark of Angels, an ancient device, even older than the entities, which caused some movement in the souls of the universes, but not in the way that they move now, more drawing the weaker strands in on one point, the Ark itself. The angels ordered the Brethren Lords to move the Nolosium network to intercept the soul movements. Set the soul movements, drawing them away from the Ark and towards the towers for study. To get near the Ark, they were supplied with new technology, which was able to generate artificial bubbles of reality in which they could exist, allowing them inside the outer realm for the first time. It was simply referred to as the Watch. Reverse engineering that technology over a number of centuries, the tower workers managed to put together something whose name translates into English as hexagon, because it consists of 6 arrays situated around a person, ship, or place in question. Although it could fit in your palm, it could generate a bubble of reality like the Watch, but far weaker. As far as I know, it doesn't actually have to be made with 6 arrays, but they kept that with that design based on another artifact they were working with at the time, some sort of crucible. As it happened, the entities, sometime down the road, deemed the Ark too important to be public knowledge, so they endeavoured to remove all direct knowledge of it, including altering the memories of the Brethren Lords and inputting an irreversible virus into their systems that the towers could never again detect its presence. This is not out of suspicion of the Lords, but rather so that no one would think they could use them in a malicious attempt to discover the true location. One last thing the entities gave the Brethren Lords was the machinery to artificially create workers for themselves, who would expect the immortals to do the menial jobs. They went through a number of designs and variations before settling on the model they use now, the Bracknars. This device is also used to add the dark matter into new Mancynn embryos. But while all this was going on, the entities were doing a further investigation of the Beta realm, which context is a remnant pocket of the previous multiverse that came before ours. The last surviving remnant of whatever multiverse came before this one. During their time in control of the multiverse, they had of course been around it and done preliminary observations. However, they had never before deemed it worthy of greater examination. Now they had the time, as the Brethren Lords were taking care of the rest of reality. Why not take the opportunity? Upon closer inspection, they found one lone artifact amongst the ruins of the temple, covered in writing, a book written in some long-dead dialect, whose cover portrayed only a strange cross-like shape with no titles. If you want to see the cross-like shape, maybe check out this channel's logo. All that at the Facebook page. Should not have. Some of the entities who were close to the equivalent of scholars managed to translate some of the book using other objects found elsewhere, and determined it was a record of great historical events, most of which were still to occur. It was a book of prophecy, with which they could predict upcoming events and prepare accordingly. The book was later named the Book of Alternity, and moved to one of the towers for Grail to study. It was this book that alerted them to the existence of the Ark, leading them to where it was hidden. I probably should have mentioned this before the Ark, but oh well. During their time in the Beta realm, after their discovery of the Book of Alternity, the entities were faced with an adversary, a race called the Viral, who were trying to invade, apparently from another multiverse. This conflict took up all of their resources and attention, a fact Kaonut took advantage of. I have already told you about his efforts to achieve personal victories using an army of Mancynn and Hexagon, and these events led to him being locked in the casket. An elaborate arc which not only trapped him inside, but shifted him into a sort of limbo, suspended between reality and the artificial world which keeps the soul energy alive within the satellite network. After a few attempts, the entities found a populated world whose inhabitants were made to protect the casket with their lives. Unfortunately for those people, the casket was too tempting to be left alone, meaning it wasn't long before they tried to open it. After a few... the entities were furious and attacked the planet. not much was left after that. The casket presumably ended up elsewhere. I think I was going for. Okay. Okay. That's. So the reason I'm pausing is that the I have another thing here next to me that needs to go and charge desperately. And also, again, this goes on for a little bit of a while. Hopefully that gives you a bit of a taster for that. Anyway, again, it does go on for a little bit, and there's a lot of information there. But of course, because it's a book, people can revisit it and check back with it if they want. And it's more stuff, it's giving you a feel for the wider reality around it, rather than all necessarily having to be remembered all at once for this one book. Okay, if you just all bear with me for 1 second, just a moment. Cool, that's all working. All right, excellent. Back now. Yeah, all right. Hopefully we're all finding this interesting, having a good time. All right, so the next thing I was supposed to talk about was why I chose to self-publish, etc. But I already talked about that. Again, if anyone wasn't there, it's basically about how long it would ultimately take to get an agent, get it published, given the current situation and circumstances. So rather get things out as quickly as possible. So instead, what I'll say is, because, again, albeit with just some editing left, re-editing left to go, with each of them, just to make sure they're absolutely the best they can be, because all of the other books in this first set of 4 are already written, I don't want to wait too long between releasing each of them. With some series of books, obviously, you have to wait ages for the next installment to come out. Here, no problem with that. Obviously, not written back to back to back to back, because that would be ridiculous. But I'm thinking, maybe because there's 4 of them, maybe over the course of a year, like every 3 months or so. So if I do that, the next one comes out at the end of November, just in time for Christmas. Then book 3 would be in February, and book 4 would be in May, which would also, it wouldn't line up perfectly with the date, because to keep it like this, it would be the end of May. But that's the month that the original book version of this book came out. So kind of coming full circle. So also, it keeps the attention, keeps the hype up. From your point of view, it means you don't have to wait for the next things to come out. And it also means, from my point of view, that this time next year, I will have hopefully 4 published books to my portfolio, rather than just some other small number, which again would be expected if I was to go through more traditional publishing services. I doubt that they would necessarily let me, but again, because they're dealing with so many other people as well, they would let me go through it in that level of rapidity. So, yeah, just before, because I don't want to get straight into reading the next section, because again, we were just reading that one there. It's a little bit long. Yeah, just anything you guys want to ask, want to talk about. It doesn't have to be about me, just any kind of conversation you want to start up with. Anything interesting happening? I mean, Amy's already said that they've submitted their dissertation, which is great. Yeah, for Amy. And else got anything interesting going on in their lives at the moment? Meanwhile, show off my apple and raspberry juice, because my throat is getting dry. What's happening in the world today? Obviously, don't want to. Thanks, YouTube, for notifying me that I'm live. I was aware of that, thank you. Hopefully, I mean, I hate to be accidentally live, but yeah. Obviously, sad news today as well, if you haven't heard already, about Chadwick Boseman passing, Black Panther, among many others. Obviously, condolences to his family and all that. Did kind of make me feel a little bit awkward this morning, with sharing the post and trying to be all upbeat and like, oh, did buy my book. Like, that it might come across as distasteful, but obviously do what we will. Situation is sad, but can't be helped. All respect is paid to him and his family. Well, if no one has anything to say, which is fair enough, I might as well just move straight on and back to the action rather than just exposition. So it should be a bit more interesting for you guys. And the final section of this, then we'll just get into the final thing of just what I want to say. And if no one else has anything that they want to just chat back and forth about, I'll probably call it there for today, which we're almost up at 2 hours, which was the amount that at the beginning I said I wanted to try to aim for. As ever, for just a reminder, links to buy the book, either in paperback or ebook, are in the description below, as well as in any of the descriptions of the videos of this channel on Facebook, Twitter, any of those places. Okay, so for this final section, we now see Philip and Noah being the one who was given the exposition last time, sneaking aboard the towers, so those being the realm of the Brethren Lords. Boredom and suspense were battling it out in Philip's mind. Nothing had happened since their entry into the tunnel network, not something he could complain about, but excitement wasn't exactly rife in this portion of their exposition into the heart of Gryle's lair either. Yet there was always that nagging thought that just as the corridor would come to a corner or an end of some description, there would be some adversary waiting to pounce upon their unsuspecting persons. But what they came across wasn't an adversary as such. The corridor ended where it joined a sort of river, a flowing wide ribbon of inky fluid. Things floated along in the stream, indiscernible, disturbing things, and through the liquid ploughed the carved pointed prow of a boat of the same bleak nothingness. On the whole, the boat greatly resembled a gondola. It was long, with shallow seats fit for only one person abreast. Every part was draped in shreds of bioluminescent plant matter. At the back of the boat was the shape of a person 7.5 feet tall. There was no visible body to the figure, just a cloak concealing anything which may or may not have existed beneath. He wasn't even certain that that cloak was tangible. To Philip, it looked more like dark air. As the pair stepped up to the vessel's rim, curls of the cloak rippled. From out of a slit in the darkness protruded a hand, pale as if it was thoroughly sun-bleached. Turning the hand over, it revealed 2 coin-sized holes etched into the palm. Expects payment, Noah informed Philip in a whisper. Philip personally thought that a carefully aimed energy burst would suffice, and even if it wouldn't, he didn't expect Noah to have any money that would pay the figure, not the type of money used in this godforsaken place. Maybe an energy burst should be used for good measure, just in case. Why didn't Noah just fry this piece of filth to hell? The figure in the boat made a move, or rather the air into which it moved became darker like its cloak, and the air that it left returned to a regular shade. It turned the shape of its head to look directly at Philip. If it had a head and a face under its hood, Philip could not imagine it. The shadow cast by the hood seemed to prevent any concept of flesh underneath. Either way, the team could not shake off the feeling that he was being eyed menacingly by something more than just blackness. Whatever you're thinking, don't, Noah warned. The Fuhrman's native tongue is similar to that of our own brainwaves, meaning he can hear what you are thinking. He exists as consciousness, not matter. He and the others like him were caught up in the early sweeps of the Alpha Realm from their home world of Chiron. Due to their energy construct, they ended up being dragged up to the towers and, almost like a filter, they couldn't find a way back out. And on that note, he turned back to the Fuhrman. You can read my mind, so go ahead, read it. Then you'll know what we're here to do. We can free you. You just need to help us. The Fuhrman turned to look this time at Noah, tilting its head in a quizzical manner. I think you'll find we don't need to pay. There was a pause before the Fuhrman retracted the hand and raised a long, thin pole from the boat floor. With no sort of barrier preventing them from proceeding, the Mancyns stepped into the vessel, taking seats one behind the other. The Fuhrman held the staff before him, and the river ahead began to froth. Globules of the fluid oozed up above the surface level, stretching out towards them without being able to fully separate from the overall mass, meaning instead of the fluid coming towards them, coming to them, the seemingly magnetic pull of the staff pulled them ever so slowly forwards. They began their journey in silence, the three of them positioned in single file, Philip at prow, the Furman at stern. The teen focused his attentions on his surroundings. The ethereal light sparkling through the translucent ceiling, which brought up opalescent patterns on the river and walls. These walls themselves, the building blocks of the tower, both dark and crumbling in places. The sights and sounds of the goings-on glimpsed through the odd window. When he saw these, the word home sprung to mind. Noah wasn't overly interested. He'd seen it all before, if not for a great deal of time. You said it was consciousness, not matter, Philip spoke in a faint whisper, so as to not let the Furman hear him, in case he said something which could be misconstrued as an insult. Though, now he thought about it, if it could hear his thoughts, the volume of his voice would make little difference. But it has a hand. We saw it. How does that work? Noah gave a sigh, followed by a noise like he was making up his mind. It's complicated. I guess the best way to think about it is that for the scenario to work, there is need of the Furman to have hands. Both that was the cat again. Where was I? Both to accept the money and to hold the stuff. Therefore, your brain sees a hand. It's not exactly what happens, but I get it. It's hard to explain. They fell back into silence, listening to the rhythmic splashing of the fluid beneath them as it broke in the wake of the boat. As would be expected, their perceived direction of gravity remained towards the bottom of the boat. The relevance of this wasn't clear to Philip until he once again looked through the windows to see that they were in fact travelling vertically up the tower rather than along it. But it was only the rooms on the other side of the wall that gave away this fact. Neither the river nor the way their clothes were hanging indicated changes in gradient. Up they travelled, now gathering speed as the magnetic properties of the staff grew. The air was rushing past their faces, pulling at their rippling cheeks. If Philip had wanted to say something to Noah, he wouldn't have been able to. It was like one of those roller coasters which shoots you forwards at around 100 miles per hour. Even Noah, who had surely ridden with the Furman a number of times during his time among the Lords, turned to look at the gondolier with a perplexed expression on his face, wondering if the speed was absolutely necessary, or even that safe. And unfortunately, with increased velocity came a decrease in the smoothness of their ride. The passengers were buffeted left, right, and centre, their heads struggling to stay in one position. Philip understood that they were levelling off when the light coming through the ceiling above them began to move up beyond their line of sight. Into view came a bay similar to the one at which they'd found the Furman. It's okay. The cat just knocked over the charging cable. What was that? They found the Furman. The boat decelerated rapidly, jolting the Mancyns forward as though it had been hit an invisible wall. The prow of the boat inched up alongside the dock before coming to a halt, the last of the ripples in the river drifting out of sight. The pair stepped out of the boat and onto the black floor, Philip feeling a bit queasy now that he was standing still. Noah made a slight gesture of appreciation in the direction of the Furman, whose only response was a continued stare. I think I'll stop at that section there. Yes, hello. Cool. All right. So that was the last of the extracts that I'm just going to provide for you today. If you want more, there's a couple of different ones on the website, DominicHodgson.com, although some of them are the same. Otherwise, again, you can buy the book from the link in the description below, paperback or ebook. You're going to come through again? All right. Cool. Yeah, hope you found it interesting. Okay. Unless anyone has any other comments that they just want to post there. Again, if you can't message in here because you don't have a YouTube account, you can message me directly if you want. If not, I just say, in terms of plans for the future, already mentioned that. Thanks, Dan, for the tweets. I'm looking to potentially release the other 3 books in the series over the course of this year, every 3 months. Other than that, I will be continuing to obviously write these books. At the moment, I've kind of not had time to do that. I have been writing some other things, purely for my own pleasure, that I may put into a YouTube video, but I don't know. I say I'm trying not to have the YouTube videos be too long, but they keep on being so. And I have a feeling the thing that I've written, the latest thing that I'm writing, would make for an even longer video. And again, I realize that people maybe don't necessarily want to watch that. Although, of course, if you don't feel like watching a long YouTube video right now, you, of course, can start it and then come back to watch the rest of it later. We're working on that. I've got involved in a potential other project that's being run by someone else that I'm not really supposed to disclose many details about, but that could be something from both from an acting and writing standpoint, potentially. I don't know yet. You are so indecisive. I just have to keep the door open at this point. But yeah, so I've got that. Otherwise, we'll just see what happens. In the meantime, yeah, we'll just. If you guys can all help with spreading the word of this book, obviously best if you get the book yourself. Even if you don't, if you spread word about it to friends, family, or just any connections you may have, or just say it to the internet or the world at large, just so it can try to find its audience. Because again, this is a starter. It's going to take a while to generate any kind of traction, especially since I'm self-publishing rather than doing it through a specific publishing house. If you do read it, then I would ask that you do afterwards leave an honest review on Amazon. That is going to definitely help as well. And obviously you can leave a review beforehand or if you haven't purchased the book. But if you have purchased it, then it helps because it says it's a verified purchaser, which gives it more validity. And if you have read it before you leave the review, then you can be more honest about it. I do intend to be honest. But yeah, spread word, help that way. Wait for the next one to come out. In the meantime, just keep paying attention to YouTube channel and different social medias for other news, other things to do with this universe. Enjoy reading. And with that, if no one has, again, anything else I just want to say, we'll just end the stream there. Just give it a few more seconds just in case. If not, farewell and have a good rest of your day. You gonna come back? No? Don't get to see the cat this time.